Hello, everyone. Welcome to another lunchtime Facebook Live here at AFABC. My name is Lucy and Lucy French, and I'm one of the family support workers here at AFABC, and I'm privileged to be coming to you from the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh territories. I'm very happy to welcome Lauri and Rebecca from Adopt for Life in Ontario. And they have said they would come and talk to us about a pretty heavy topic that they've been exploring over there at Adopt for Life. And we want to bring here to BC to open up the conversation. And it's child-to-parent violence and aggression. So thank you, Rebecca and Lauri, for joining us. I'm going to pass it over to both of you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll start the questions. So whoever wants to go first. Lauri.
Okay. I always say great. I jump in with my great. Hi, I'm Lauri Cabral, and I'm here today from Ottawa, which is Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. And I want to thank you for inviting us. I'm an adoptive parent and a biological parent. So I have 3 kids ranging from 14 to 22. And I've worked with Adopt for Life for a number of years now, about 6 years. And we'll introduce the topic and why we're here today a little bit later, but that's kind of me.
Yeah, and my name's Rebecca, and I'm also with Adopt for Life. I am wanting to recognize that I am on the traditional territory of many nations that for thousands of years have been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to live and to work on this land. I am a mom to 2 teenagers currently. They joined our family through adoption, one through private and one through a public arrangement. And I have been working for Adopt for Life for the last couple of years, and you can't see I have swag on. So there's our logo on here, but you can't, this wasn't designed for Zoom. We need to start putting logos on our shoulders.
Or maybe a hat.
Yeah, so Lauri and I have been working together with another parent who has been experiencing child-to-parent violence and aggression, and she has led us to this path of understanding what's been going on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's what brings us here today.
Thank you so much. All right, so I think we're going to dive into the questions that we have we've created, and then at the end, if there's other questions that come up through the chat, please feel free to put the questions in the chat. And we have people moderating the chat. If for some reason you don't feel comfortable putting the question from yourself, you can go directly to one of the moderators, Elaine, and ask the question, and she can post it for you. But please feel free to ask questions as they come up. If we don't have time to get to the questions, we will do our best to answer them later. You can also call one of the family support workers, and we can support you after privately as well. Okay. So first question is for Rebecca. And I wondered if you can help define child-to-parent aggression.
So once again, this is something that we are using from a lot of the work that's been done in the UK. So the working definition we have currently, which is changing and evolving as we understand things differently, but right now the language we're using is that if others in the family feel threatened, intimidated, or controlled by violence or aggression, and they have to adjust their behavior to accommodate threats, that would be, you know, our actual sentence. But the pieces of that are things like pattern, right? The pattern of behavior. This isn't something that happened once or twice. This is something that is ongoing. I think an important part of the definition is the element of fear. So the experience of a parent is very important as part of the defining feature. that it contains an element of change in the family dynamics. Often it's about control and feeling safe, right? So often, you know, we want parents to have an element of control in the family, whereas often that's kind of flipped with the dynamics that are going on. It can be children or adolescents. This is not a definition to narrow it to specific age other than, you know, not in another adult. And we've really found that intent and purposefulness is not always believed to exist. So some of the other terms that have been used indicate that the child's willfully participating in this, and that's not always the case. But they are seeking some sense of control. And that's often an element that is used when we're defining what's going on. I do want to mention, because I'm getting a little hung up on my language, that it's a working title, right? So we're using child to parent violence and aggression. Sometimes we shorten it to CPVA. We're using that currently because that's what sits best right now with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the UK, but it doesn't mean that it will always be those terms. It's something that's going to change internationally. It's most often described this way. And so, you know, when we're looking at research and we're looking at articles and information, those are the terms that we'd be searching under. But over the next year, we will be speaking to many about coming to some consistency regarding what Canada should call it. That's kind of where we're at with all that. Did that answer your question, Lucy?
It absolutely did. Thank you. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like the more we have this dialogue, the more that all the different provinces get involved and this conversation happens, we can come to that kind of collective name that feels comfortable. So that makes sense. Exactly. Did you want to add anything to that, Lauri?
Yeah, maybe we don't want to overstay on this topic. I know you guys only have an hour, but it's really important to us. I mean, we started kind of like a grassroots, you know, a lot of our families were telling us that they were experiencing violence and aggression in their home. So really, you know, kids coming to their home with trauma, and some of the experiences they were having was, you know, kids carrying knives or threatening them with knives, threatening other children in the home. You know, it really, when we're looking at this, we can't say enough that it's not really your traditional parenting of a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum or a young teen, you know, losing it one time and breaking a wall or doing something that they regret later. This is really the idea is that the child often appears really dysregulated in how they manage their emotions. It can be in coming home from school, or in shifting through activities, different environments. And you're kind of seeing this out of normal range or habit where the parent really starts feeling nervous about telling the child they have to go to bed or you know, telling them they have to turn off the TV. Yeah, so yeah, we kind of want to make it real, and the what we call it is going to become more important, but it's going to become more important by hearing from more and more parents and more of our community. So we really see ourselves, we started something, we're starting the discussion, and that's why we're here today, to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're learning as we go, right?
Right. Great, thank you.
Do
you have a sense of, no, this is what we're here for. It's good. Lauri, do you have a sense of how common an issue this is in Canada, or like?
Yeah, let me start with the research that we found in the UK just for 1 second, because I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
So there's a professor in Oxford, her name is Julie Selwyn, and we can certainly give you the link to her research, but she went out there to do a study on why sometimes adoptions don't work out for the family, or why some of the children that are adopted end up living out of the home. And she interviewed 30,000, or she actually probably didn't interview them, but she did a questionnaire for 30,000 families. And out of it, she came to realize that there were only about 2 or 3% that ended up with them living outside the home. But there was another 27% of families that were living with really high levels of stress in their home. So you know, you're looking, and in all the cases, or a strong majority of those that ended up living outside the home, there was the existence of child to parent violence and aggression. And in the other 27, there was also child to parent violence and aggression. So this really resonated with us because it was what we were seeing. We represent, I think, 1,000 adoptive families across Ontario. And it resonated with us because it's what we were seeing when we were working with the families. So since then we found a little bit of research. We did a very quick questionnaire of our families, and out of 140 families, there were 70% that quickly responded, yes, we're experiencing child to parent violence and aggression in our homes. Now, that's not to say 70% of adoptive families experience it, but it was a pretty big response. And then since then, we've actually found a couple of different research pieces. We have a researcher in Ontario that during COVID did a very small study interviewing 10 families with children with neurodevelopmental issues. Most of them had been diagnosed with FASD. And 8 out of 10 of those parents said that they were experiencing violence initiated by their child. And when we look at Stats Can, they're highlighting that 22% of domestic violence cases are actually the child initiated. So it's relatively prevalent. I mean, they quote anywhere from 22 to about 30%, really. I guess I guess we should highlight here too. I mean, it's really not just an adoption issue, and we want to make that really, really clear. Like, this is not, children that are adopted are violent or aggressive. It seems to be, children that are dysregulated sometimes use violence to express, or to when they're not controlling their emotion, or that they're trying to control something in their environment. But we're parenting a lot of children that come with indicators that would make them a little bit more likely to use this as a technique, or technique. I'm not sure. That sounds like it's conscious, as a way of expressing themselves, maybe,
or a way of
voluntarily
control too, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, so little control in as a child in general, and then you add on the layers of trauma and loss and through that come through adoption and right, it just kind of makes some sense. But I appreciate that you say that this is not an adoption issue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, per se. Okay. Did you want to add anything to that, Rebecca?
No, I think Lauri's
good.
Done it justice.
Lauri, this one's for you as well. And you kind of spoke to it, I think, but do you think that it's on the rise, or just more people talking about it?
I think that it's on the rise with COVID. I think that what we're seeing, I mean, it's interesting, you guys might be noticing the same thing in your community, but in our community, there's a percentage of our families that actually, at least initially in COVID, thought it was their kids' lives were less complicated because they were running less places and they were moving less. I know even in our home, I felt like there was a de-stressing of our child. And, that was some learning for us. But I think overall, just being locked in at home and having so many rules and not being able to see their friends, that we're and everybody's kind of stuck together on top of each other. We're seeing a rise, and the numbers are looking at about 40% increase. But whether it's, I think it's related to COVID. I think it's a big factor for our families.
And just think about the lack of release all of us have had. I know, like, even can't imagine, like, my guys need certain things, but like even basketball, I mean, in the middle of winter, if that's your sport, you can't go indoors to play, you can't go outdoors to play, there's no release. Shoveling the driveway is a chore. It's not something that a child, you want to get in a fight about that. Like, everything's so complicated right now.
I think every level is dysregulated.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that adults are just having trouble with their regulation, right? And
Yeah.
their anxiety is high, and our kids
That's
just
right.
are sponges for that, right? So
Yeah. And we talk so much about the system and how much of, how much is it biological, how much of is it, systemic, and think about how much our whole systems have changed this last year.
and the support systems, right? That a lot of our families and families in general are able to access support, or that a lot of that has also shifted and become virtual. And I mean, we know how kids are with being on the computer, like getting support's challenging enough for kids, and then trying to do it over the computer, it can be really hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Rebecca, this one is for you. Why is it important to bring this up? Why are we talking about it today? Why did you guys bring this up?
We have found that parents have been so isolated, and up until recently, we at Adopt for Life were supporting parents who were experiencing this, but we didn't have a name for it. We didn't have an ability to even give the release of knowing that someone else has named this, and you can talk about it to someone else using terms that people understand. And so really for us, we want to reduce the stigma, and we want to increase the support. So by talking about it, we're hoping to reduce the stigma for many. It's been such a secret for so long, and families are feeling very isolated. And the longer it's gone on this way, the spiral is downward, right? So often what fuels the violence in part can be the secrecy. And so simply by identifying it, naming it, and sharing it with others, we are switching into a more empowered place for the parents, and a place where the child is less likely to continue to use this, or more likely to receive some support, acknowledging that it's problematic and it's not just something that's going to go away. So we want families who are experiencing this to be able to reach out. We want them to have language to talk to us, to talk to you, to talk to practitioners, therapists, doctors, social workers, Children's Aid Society. We want them to know that they have, whether they've been struggling for a short period of time or a long period of time, they're not alone. The thought that this is something wrong with me, my family, rather than understanding that this is happening to, in other homes, and other people are struggling, and it's not necessarily just personal to you or a defect in you, but it's something that other people have been working to overcome and work with, or change their mindset, or reach out for help, or get a break. All of those things are perfectly experienced elsewhere, and so not personal to the individual. And I think, sometimes people are just starting to get worried, and if they've not been living with it for a long time, and it really helps them to be able to take a look at early intervention, because that can really break the pattern so that it doesn't become entrenched as a part of the family dynamic, that it's a new understanding of what's going on and can be supported and worked through together. Let me check my notes, see if there's anything I wanted to say about this. I was thinking about the impact of the entire family unit, and that if we all have a safe place to talk about this, it lowers the anxiety as well. So the contribution we might make as parents to some of the dynamics in our home can also be altered if we're getting the support we need. Even if the behavior is not changing from the child, if our response and our way of adapting is supported, then that's worth talking about it. I was thinking about some families when I first started at Adopt for Life. we didn't have this name, as I said, and once they had identified that there was violence going on, and I didn't dismiss it, because sometimes we do, right? We think, oh, a 3-year-old, they're, it's a developmental norm. And but once I started pausing and really asking, how are you experiencing that? What dynamic is that in your home? Are you getting hurt? Are you worried? Are you getting support? Once these sort of questions started coming out, and parents, I had a few parents say to me, I have been worried since I brought this one home. And people kept telling me it was a problem with me, because as an adoptive mom, I had to do all this work to prove myself worthy of being a parent. And so they disregarded it as an overcautious parent. But inside, I have known this is not right. This is not a dynamic that I can live with much longer. And I had given up speaking about it because no one understood. So another reason why we're bringing this forward, and I think in the adoption world, that's a huge part. A lot of us come with insecurities that we might not even be aware of, right? Like, we had to do the home studies and the pride and the police checks and the RCMP checks, and we needed references from our friends and family. And then we had to talk to our friends and family about what kind of parenting we'd be. And then we had to do the social work visits. And, like, consciously you're pumping yourself up, but that's gotta, for a lot of us, play on what's going on in the background.
We better get this right then, right?
That's
We
right.
better be really good at it and have no problems, right?
Yeah. We sometimes talk about that, how, we're supposed to be the super parents, right? But the reality is, we love our kids and we're committed to them and we want them to be their best. And sometimes in trying to protect them, we're not getting the help we need. So it's really that balance for us of, the guilt and shame thing is so prevalent in all parties to this. There was some of the research showing, which I was really happy to see, the voice of the child. And what they were saying is that when they use this technique, they feel shameful. So it's not like we're trying to place one party of this above the needs of the other. Like, this is a family systems issue. And so we're saying, really, we want to help that family be successful. And to do that, we have to be able to talk about it, whether we call it child to parent violence and aggression, whether we change the language. It's just so important for us to have this community. I mean, you guys have it in BC, we have it in Ontario, we have each other across provinces. But we really have to come together to find out ways that we can help our kids. And if we're keeping something like this hidden, then it's not in anybody's best interest.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the voice of the child, because it's just another layer of the secrecy, right? So the parent might be able to come forward about their experience, but is the child able to come forward about their experience? And what about the child's sibling, right? Yeah. Another piece that there's been a lot of secrecy around, the sibling in the home that can't have friends over because they're worried about whether the other sibling's gonna, act out while their friends are visiting, or a grandparent, or whoever might be else in the home. Yeah. And so to support the whole family through this, because nobody is doing well when this is happening, right? The child, the parent, the sibling are all suffering. And whether it's mental health or physical health or the financial health of the home, we've had many parents have to work reduced hours to try and support their child, or not work at all, or the amount of therapy or assistance that they've tried to bring in to help with their child's behavior has been at a great cost to them as well. So the cost is quite great, emotionally, physically, spiritually, if you believe in such a thing.
And it was interesting too for us that, a lot of the parents that came forward were kind of holding these secrets. They had come up with amazing ways that were adaptive for their family to survive and to keep going. And when we started talking about it together and it was more open, we started getting ideas from each other. So I think it really is, another reason why we are creating safe places where we can talk about the reality of our little complicated beings, and how they've complicated us, because it becomes this little ecosystem, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I know each of my kids has changed me in some way. And so we need to be able to check in and say, okay, where is that pendulum right now? You know, are we in a good place? Are we in a safe place? And if we're not, then do we have people that could be able to help us? The other thing is, I know I'm talking a lot. I tend to do
Yeah,
that.
that's great.
I was so shocked and warmed by the amount of professionals that have come to us and said, you know what, in my practice, I'm dealing with this and I don't know how to be of maximum service. So they're actually congratulating us on doing this and saying, like, you know, can we come together? Can we all learn more together? Can we come up with Canadian culturally sensitive solutions for this? And that's really heartwarming to me.
Yeah. I'm really, one of you said something, I mean, the secrecy is such a huge, it stops us from moving forward, right? It stops families from asking for help. You know,
Yes.
couples keep it within themselves, and like you said, they create these systems in their house to not be alone, right? To have a parent come home at a certain time because the kid's coming home, and they just kind of figure out how to create their life all around this one situation. And it's like they're not talking, they're whatever feelings they're having, they're not talking to other adults. And I just
No.
the secrecy
And
part
it's courageous. I mean, they have good solutions.
right?
It's just you know, the more we talk about it and can learn from each other, the more solutions we'll all have, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's sustainable as well, right? Like it might be okay for a period of time. Where we all did really, you know, we dug in for March last year, right? Okay, March. I mean, we're a year later.
Yeah.
We're all afraid at the edges. It's not sustainable, right? What we were doing last year.
It's a great analogy, Rebecca. I kind of think of it that way. Yeah. You know, it's moving from crisis management to a more sustainable model. And it's thinking outside the box. I mean, now we do have some families that the child is either, you know, maybe temporarily not living with them, but that's what the family needed. If you can't ask about that or really get some input, then that's too big of a weight for you to be carrying on your own, you know? Yeah, I always think of Rebecca, it might have been you that said, you know, when you're parenting, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and they say it takes a city to raise a traumatized child. Yeah. So, you know, we need to make that city for ourselves. We need to allow that. And to do that, we have to trust somebody, right? So good place to start with our community.
Yeah. That's kind of brings me to the next question. And I know we talked a little bit about this because it's, you know, strategies are not one size fits all by any means, but maybe you could speak a little bit to what you're doing through Adopt for Life around supporting your families. But what are there any strategies that you found that parents can try at home if they are experiencing this, or if strategies isn't the right word, is there another word?
Yeah, is there a way, maybe even a way to think about this? And Rebecca, I'm going to ask, like, are you asking me? Can I start?
Sorry, that was
Lauri,
for Lauri.
You go.
But you know what? You're both so amazing, and whoever wants to. Yeah, it was for you, Lauri.
We work well together.
You do.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, you said it right off. There's no magic fix for this. And we have to stop thinking that there could be, you know, even for ourselves, when we started looking through this, I kept reading more and more reports from the UK and chat lines like, where's the answer? And the reality is I mean, I see it now as a dance, you know, where you're creating this ecosystem around the child that's healthy and around us as parents that's healthy. And I think the first step is really naming the problem. You know, what problem is it that we're trying to address in this family? And then identifying support for the family. So So for us, Adopt for Life in Ontario is a big part of the support for our families, for ourselves. And it sounds like you guys have that in BC, the same type of thing, but there might also be other informal supports that are around families that they're not really thinking about right now. Because a lot of us have kind of isolated ourselves, when maybe we didn't think our parents understood the issue, or that we didn't have siblings that understood the issue, or their next door neighbors might not understand the issue. And I fear sometimes that we put up a little bit too high of a wall. And so now we're starting to try and find language and safe ways to let some of those people back in. So that you have places to go, you have people to trust, you can get a little bit of a break, maybe alone with the other kids in the home, or, and even for the child, some of the children that use CPBA find it restful to be out of the home for a little bit. They need a little bit of a break. So reintroducing that ecosystem around you, whatever that looks like, doing work to brainstorm with people you trust on, is there a next door neighbor that could come in an urgent situation, or even give a little bit of time for individual children in the home. So that's one thing, identifying supports for each of us as a family. And then we talk a lot about this, but prioritizing issues. So, oftentimes when we're meeting with a family, or sometimes I feel like that even in my own family, like I have so many, by the time I actually go to get help, I have a list that's, a foot long on all the things that should be changed, and just picking one or two and saying, these are really the priority issues in this family. If we could just get it so that, I don't know what it could be, but a realistic goal. It could be around internet time. It could be about dinners, or it could be about,
bedtime.
yeah. So it could be any of those issues where you think, okay, this is a priority for our family, and then starting to focus on that, so you can celebrate the successes of that as well. And you can start seeing that as we move along and we create a little bit more open space for each other, we can actually come up with good solutions that might work in either not triggering a confrontation. So if you're focusing on one, then it makes it a little bit easier for you to anticipate that might happen, and things you might be able to change so it doesn't come head to head. So prioritizing, we look at de-escalation techniques. Rebecca, did you want to talk about that? Because you've done a lot.
Yeah, we've had a few parents participate in formal training for some of the de-escalating. And these, we're all coming at our parenting with a different set of skills, right? So some of our parents are, have studied and are therapists in that field, whereas others are, accountants, and some basic information around crisis prevention and intervening has been really helpful for parents on both sides of the spectrum. Those who have studied it kind of go, oh my goodness, I forgot all my basic stuff. When I'm in a crisis, I escalate the person, and I hit back verbally, right? And I get things going, and I totally forgot to look at some of the basic things, like my body posture, where I'm standing, tone of voice, that someone who's sad needs a hug, but someone who's angry needs a little space and firmer boundaries. Like all that kind of stuff has been so helpful for some of our parents. And so that's, a thing that's out there, and I'm sure you've got programs in your province that can be very helpful for that. But also just understanding families, like some of the personal work that's being done with some of our parents in therapy, saying, we've brought this child home, and for X number of years, things were going along quite well. We thought the attachment was great. We thought that, the trauma that they had experienced wasn't really bubbling up. And then all of a sudden at like 12, puberty, something changes. And now all of a sudden I need the techniques. I need to be able to utilize this stuff that I just didn't prepare for, and I haven't really kept it active in my mind because things were going along quite well up until now. And so being able to provide them with some support around that, therapy will often be able to cover some of that as well, right? Really individualizing it for a person. What else, Lauri?
Well, it's so easy to get triggered, right? Like, because you feel in a lot of cases that these children are trying to take over your position as the person of authority in the house. And what we don't see is you are the parent, you have natural authority. So we don't have to follow their lead and escalate. We can actually, we can actually stay quite regulated and say, you know what, I'm going to need a couple of minutes before I get back to you, or I'm just going to take a minute and breathe, and we can walk them back into our way of doing things instead of being responsive to their triggers, right? And that kind of leads me, Rebecca, to the safety planning, which we don't do safety planning, but we often encourage families to work on a safety plan with their therapist, or their child welfare agency, or whoever can help them, because we find, especially in the initial stages, if the violence is quite pervasive in your home, a safety plan anticipating what could happen and coming up with ideas of how you're going to mitigate that means you're not as panicked when something does happen. Right?
Yeah, it made me think about that, sort of having that person. I remember speaking with somebody on the phone, and she had a person she could call, like that
Yes.
she could call
Yes.
when she was needing to
Yes.
needing to regulate her own self so that she could be regulated for her child. But like having that as
Yes.
part of your safety plan, like who is that person that you can call that can just listen and can hear, that can just be there for you. And then
Or
also I was thinking,
I was just going to say, or change the dynamics, right? Some people have a person who's, we've had several families talk about just someone who they happen to live nearby who won't take crap, right? So they walk in, they go, what's going on here? And everybody kind of just shifts back into a functional way of, or a soft, gentle, knock around, borrowing an item, just having a witness around somehow changes the dynamics, right? It doesn't even have to be something just for the parent to reach out for, but it can be something to change the dynamics in the moment as well, rather than, call 911. Well,
yeah, it regulates the child in many of those cases, right?
I like that idea.
Yeah.
I was
And
thinking,
we always say, oh, sorry. I was going to say, a lot of people feel like they don't want to do a safety plan because they're like, oh, it only happened once, or, oh, it's not going to happen again. In most of our kids, this is a dysregulation. It's not intentional. They don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to lose it on my parent. It's something is occurring in that environment. That behavior does have meaning. And what we want to do is try and shift their way of managing that behavior, right? So you want to shift how we react as the adults in the relationship so that it doesn't get dysregulated, but we also want to have a plan if it does, that we can all stay safe. So we always say, just because you have a fire safety plan in your home doesn't mean you're going to have a fire. It just means, what, if we do have a fire, we all know what to do. And so I don't have to worry as much about the younger kids, or I don't have to worry about, I don't know, getting to my phone, or we've anticipated this. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it does mean if it does, we have at least some things in place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Documentation too, I think this is my last point on this question, is something that's we found pretty important for our families, is keeping notes. And that's not only, in case you're investigated, because in some of our families, they get investigated by child welfare numerous times. So it helps with that, but it also helps even if you're seeing a therapist or you're talking to somebody who can be helpful to start seeing if there's a pattern. Is there a time of day? Is there, are there other triggers that you're not noticing? And when you actually write it down and start looking at it, can be really helpful. So I think documentation is
I can imagine it also validates the experience, because I think often things can happen and then we're like, oh, it's better now. You know, I don't even think that was that bad, right? But then when you go back and you read it, it's like, it kind of helps you to sort of remember it. I creating that pattern.
I need help. Yeah, I really need help. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you. So speaking of I need help, what kinds of help are out there for parents? I mean, I know you guys are in Ontario, but sort of what sort of things do you have that you could recommend?
Is this you, Rebecca? Are you
both.
start?
I have you both down here. So I'll go start with Rebecca. Sorry, I'm losing it.
Jumped in anyway. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of tangible things, I mean, we've done a number of webinars at Adopt for Life, and those are open to the public. So if you go to our website and you have to kind of maneuver around a bit under resources and then CPVA, if you're looking
we
for
can probably link them in the chat.
Okay.
I put it in the chat here so people can see it.
A lot of the things that you'll talk about, we'll be putting in the chat. So
okay, so that is one, and there are quite a number of webinars now. There's one coming out that will be posted in the next, hopefully, week or two, where Al Coates from the UK and I did a webinar around more of the parenting, like exploring the parenting piece, and then we're planning to do that again in May, where we'll get more into the specifics of kind of the ins and outs. What other things? So we've got, obviously there are people like Dan Hughes, who has the, PACE. We've got Helen Bonnick and her website, Holes in the Wall, where parents can scroll through and find out, some of the stories and scenarios and resources and things that have been going on there. Stuart Shanker's Self-Reg book is something that we're doing a book club on, working on the interbrain between the child and the parent, and becoming a detective, a behavioral detective, trying to figure out what's going on in the child's experience. Lauri, what other tangible things?
Well, I'm going to talk more about we did, so we now have, there's going to be some research that's starting probably by the fall on prevalence in Canada. So we're probably going to ask you guys, your community, if you want to participate, but it'll be questionnaires on parents, and we want to look at we want to start getting some Canadian research out there. So prevalence in Canada. So the University of Ottawa has undertaken to do that. We're also bringing together a small beginning of a group, a national group, to start looking at what should we call it? How should we define it? And there'll be representation from parents, from children, from academics, and from professionals starting to develop something for Canada. But on a more closer to home, I love, we started a private Facebook page for our families that are experiencing CPVA. And I think for our community, that's been really good. We have, I think, 75 parents now, or families, that are signed up to that now, and they can now reach each other. So we know it's safe because we've done intakes. We know these families, and they're working closely with us, but it allows them to share ideas with each other as well. And then Rebecca has a small support group that she runs as well for some of our families.
I can tell you're thinking they're not alone, right? You're not alone. And that's just such an amazing, we'll have to pick your brain about how you guys started these things. Sorry, Rebecca.
I think that's the piece I was picking up on as well, Lucy, just that piece around the parent-to-parent peer support. That model is so empowering, and it can be life-changing for so many people, right? So if you've got a mother and a mother who are experiencing a similar pain, and they have opened up enough that they can trust one another with that, they follow up with each other, like, oh, how did that meeting go? Or those touch points can be just so huge. And when we take a look at the trajectory, right? I mean, we're not talking about major shifts in how things are functioning in a household. We're talking sometimes incremental, just micro shifts. If you take a look at the long run, how much of a difference that ends up in where you end up, right? So I think this group, I mean, it's new to us. We're learning. None of us would consider ourselves experts at all, right? We're all wanting to be in this together and learn and grow. So the Facebook group, or whatever platform, you know, when people are coming together, it's scary. So I think that those first people that joined were the ones that had the courage to say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put my name and my face on this page and see. And so, you know, expect that it might be quiet at first, right? As people establish whether it really is a safe place, whether there's going to be a lot of judgment. And same with the support groups and other ways of bringing people together. At first, rightfully guarded, right? Rightfully guarded. But as we break down, what's that, Lauri?
Yeah, and we were concerned. I was just going to say we were concerned at first because we're not experts.
Yeah.
But then we realized the whole beauty of this is there isn't only one solution, and you can't take something this complicated and try and do a one size fits all. You know, it really was, as Rebecca said, a parent that's experiencing child to parent violence and aggression that started us out on this journey. And so we're constantly reminded. We have many people working with Adopt for Life that have experienced this or are experiencing it. You know, it's in our community. And so I think that more heads being put together on this is important. And it's not that we're looking for a quick fix or a one size fits all solution. It's really part of a discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. Those were our questions that we had talked about, but I do have a question. I haven't actually read it because I've been so focused on, so there was a question that was put up, so I'm just going to read it here. So how do parents access support from their friends and family when the child only does these behaviors with no one else around to see it?
Yeah.
How do you get people to understand and believe the severity of what's happening when kiddo is charming with everyone?
Oh my goodness, you are not alone in struggling with that.
Yeah.
First off, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but there are many parents who children display this behavior at school or other places, and there are many parents where that what you just described is exactly what the struggle is. And honestly, I think, can I start off, Lauri?
Yeah, please.
First off, I know with some of the families that I've walked alongside where this is the scenario, it almost feels like the parent is looking, I just need someone to believe how hard this is for me. Like, just believe me. Like, that's the first. And sometimes it's really an unexpected person that believes. So my suggestion usually is to reach out to more than one place to test the waters, right? To see if there's a sympathetic ear, but also to help instruct. What we found to be very helpful for a number of people is to give the parent the words so that they know what they're looking for, and they can ask their friend, family, or support person or therapist what they need. Say, I need someone to listen to me and not to give me one suggestion as to how I can parent differently. I want you to tell me that you understand how hard this is for me. And just like to be able to advocate for their need in that moment, so that the person is released from all the problem solving that we feel like we have to do when we're hearing pain from another person, and just cry with them or acknowledge it. That's often been the number one need right off the bat. But sorry, Lauri, I think you wanted to say something too. So.
No, I think we're totally on the same page with this. It really is, like you say, it's unfortunate, but it's fairly common. It's almost like the kids keep it together with people that they trust less, which means that they're expressing themselves. They're exhausted by the end of the day. So, you know, they're often coming home and they're dysregulated in the home. I mean, we have a lot of families where the kids look honestly like charming A students. They're on committees at school and they have friends. But imagine how much weight that child is carrying by not being consistent, right? So I always kind of go back and think, well, are they being consistent? Because to be healthy, we're relatively consistent. And then once you start talking, hopefully within your community here, as Rebecca said, nice to be someplace where you can actually talk and not feel like you're trying to convince somebody of something. You'll come up with your language that you need to be able to say, I'm not going to work on convincing you to the people that are closest to you and that could be helped, but could you please offer and be more specific about what it is they can be doing to be helpful to you? Could you help us by, because you don't need them to do everything anymore. You need them to provide one piece of a solution for you. Whether it's, could you be helpful? And listen, it's great that they're not like this with everybody in some ways, because it means those people can offer respite. Those people can offer safe places for you so you can get a little bit of a rest and you can recharge. And so yeah, that's my addition to that.
And I guess if there is some behind that question, if there's a concern around getting help for the child and being believed in the professional world, there are strategies that some parents have employed in terms of documenting, the events or taking pictures of the injury, or there's ways to do that. But I think that the difficulty in accessing support when not being believed, obviously, is that people disregard it, or they think it's just a stage, the developmental milestone, so finding a support person to maybe help advocate in the professional world, whether it's Children's Aid Society or your doctor or pediatrician or whatever it may be, having an advocate work with you just to be a witness that you've shared the information, often changes the dynamic in the conversation, that the other person will be taking it more seriously and listening. Those sorts of things. I don't know if that was what was behind the question.
Yeah. I think this is where the documentation piece could really play a big part. I think you said that, Rebecca, but right, like having this, documenting it so that you can.
And really, it's our hope that as we get out more and more to the professional communities, that this will become a little bit more known. But because it's so hidden right now, professionals don't know to look for it or to ask about it. So I mean, that's not a now answer. That's just part of, we understand, we get it. It's not easy. We've had a lot of people too, where the professionals, they seem to take the side of the child almost. And so there's this bizarre kind of relationship that's created because they're not seeing the child for who they truly are. And when that's getting in their way, they're not able to help the child as much as they could, right? So, yeah.
And that's part of the system that we're in. It's part of that piece that we believe parents should be in control of their child, and parents are responsible for their child's behaviors. And so when there's that mentality, and it's very difficult for a parent to say, but that's not happening here. Like if I get involved, it's going to get worse. Like I have to withdraw, or whatever is going on in the family. That's very difficult to change a whole system. But finding a believer, finding one person who in the professional world could maybe open the door to more supports for you as well. Some compassionate, understanding professional is key, right? And I think
through communicating through like your Facebook group, I mean, that must be another place where people can have those conversations. But how did you do it, right? How did you open those doors? How did you have those conversations? What professionals did you go to? So I can see that's another benefit to having these groups.
Yes. Yeah.
We have one more question. I just wanted to say we're getting close to our 1 hour. This has been such an amazing conversation. Are you okay if I ask the next question? I feel like I'm cutting you off.
You may have to cut us off.
I may have to cut. Okay, I have permission. When CPVA is talked about, it's often talked about how the child is dysregulated. We were talking about that. What about when the child is totally calm and describes how they will? So they describe how they will assault the parent, as opposed to doing it. It's not a rage of dysregulation. It's a child talking about a plan. You guys?
Yes.
That's
certainly something. Right? Certainly something that our parents experience.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and it's sometimes parents suspect that it's something their child had witnessed before they had joined their family, and that it's being relived or repeated in, you know, that kind of moment. Parents are sometimes at a loss as to where that comes from and why it's coming out the way it is. It's certainly
And I think, yeah, I think talking about it is still, and please don't get us wrong. Like, even when we say, you know, a lot of it is trauma, not all of it is trauma. And a lot of it is dysregulation. Not all of it looks like dysregulation. We don't really know. But we do know for sure that the parents, regardless of how they came into this, are, if they can find people that they can trust to talk about it and brainstorm about, the more they feel safe, the more they can come up with a plan that works for their family. And we have to put everything on the table. Everything has to be okay to talk about, to think about someplace, so that we can come up with the best possible solution for that family, that unit. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
What just makes you think like there's no kind of answer, right, for that, this question this person is putting? It's not like there's sort of a, as we talked about, that strategy. There's not that one.
There's no boxes in this.
There's no, that, you know, but what could happen if the conversation started to happen and you were able to talk to more people that were going through this, and maybe one thing that happens is you don't feel as alone, and then you're just a little bit stronger and a little bit feeling that safer, and that,
well, and another might be a safety plan, right, that you end up in place. Or we're having discussions with a group, they're actually in Calgary, I believe, that do nonviolent resistance, and they are looking at that system intervention as well. So regardless of what causes the behavior, you're looking at how can the family react, and coming up with a plan so that you feel some element of control over your family environment. So all of this would be quite consistent.
Yeah. Heavy question.
Yeah.
Well, it's a heavy topic.
It is.
Yeah.
And I really,
with lots of hope, though, lots of hope that it can be, not magically fixed, but that there's a lot of room for improvement, both in how professionals are dealing with it, and how families are able to navigate it.
Yeah. And that's certainly why we wanted to have you come, and why we wanted to have this conversation start, so that we can figure out how to best support, our community and our families. And this conversation is so important. And, we're going to meet again in a year or less and see where we're at, all the movement that's going to have happened.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that what you're doing by bringing this conversation to the forefront is you're enacting all the things we're talking about, right? We're saying words, we're sharing stories. There are concepts that are shifting, and I think that what a lot of our families, when they measure their success, it's shifted because their narrative has shifted as well. Right? It's not, they don't have the Disney vision of how their life is supposed to be any longer. They're looking at their family and the capacity that everyone has, and they're marking and measuring with a new measuring stick.
Right.
And so we're able to celebrate these successes that each of us understand as a major success.
Right. It may not look
might not look like that on the big screen with the, sorry, I used a name brand there. I didn't mean to, but fantasy movies.
Yeah.
We can't compare to that.
Yeah.
We must compare to our own capacity and to the capacity of our child, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And this is not the end of this conversation. And we look forward to more conversations and being part of some of the upcoming things. And I can't recommend more the YouTube videos that you guys have done. So you know, I really recommend that you go and find those. Hopefully the links are in the Facebook chat, but either way, we'll get them out for sure. And yeah, thank you again.
Really nice to speak
Thank
with you, Lucy, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing over there.
Well, we really
And thank you
appreciate
to
you.
everybody that tuned in. I hope we had some value to add.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who tuned in. And the nice thing is people can watch this again if they need to, and later on in the day. So, all right, everybody, have a good rest of your Tuesday and stay safe, and we'll talk again.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.